Hello, everybody. My name is Rakesh Soni. I'm your host today, and welcome to IIT Dhanbad Entrepreneurs Global Meet 3. And today, the panel is on mastering the art of fundraising, and we have two amazing speakers. So let me introduce them first, and then we will start our conversation. So first is Rashmi Gopinath. Rashmi is an experienced investing partner and currently working as a partner at B Capital Group, San Francisco-based VC firm with over $1.4 billion under management. In the past, you also worked for Microsoft Venture M12, Intel Capital. Before that, she comes with the operating background, worked on the product and engineering and go-to-market. Rashmi is also an advisor to Women's Startup Lab Accelerator. She's recognized by Global Corporate Ventures as #5 of top 50 emerging leaders in global corporate VC funds. And also nominated by Information Age and Women in IT in 2018 as a Woman of the Year and Business Role Model of the Year. So welcome to the panel, Rashmi.
Thanks, Rakesh. Really excited about this conversation today.
Yeah, and then you are based out of San Francisco, correct?
That's right, I am.
Well, thanks for waking up early for us, and sorry for ruining your Saturday morning sleep.
No worries, I'm usually up early. We have our team in Singapore, fairly global presence, and a team in India. So I'm definitely used to early mornings and late evenings.
All right, thanks, Rashmi. And audience, just to add one more, Rashmi is also a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. So, Rashmi, do you still practice the Bharatanatyam?
Through my daughter, I unfortunately don't have that much of time available. I do my Bollywood classes once in a while, but
Yeah.
my daughter is learning Bharatanatyam, so it's more exciting seeing that through her.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, I understand UVCs are very busy people. So,
But that's an amazing range of things you do, Rashmi. Hats off to you.
Thanks, KRS. Staying
Being
busy.
a mother, yeah.
awesome. And then we have KRS Jamwal, sir. Mr. Jamwal is one of the IIT Dhanbad graduate as well, class of 1987, petroleum engineer. And right after ISM, he went to IIM Ahmedabad. So he graduated from there in 1989. Currently, he's working as an executive director with the TATA Industries. He's responsible for conceptualizing or ideation strategies and incubation of new ventures, as well as new business investments at TATA Industries. He's also an experienced board member, presently sits on board of Tata Click, which is, I think, a big e-commerce initiative of Tata Group.
Actually,
Smart Foods.
can I interject? Okay, I'll tell you
Yes.
what I'm really proud of. I conceptualized and launched Tata Click. That's my baby. Tata Smart Foods conceptualized and launched. That's also my baby. Tata Health conceptualized and launched, but still yet to scale up. So Tata Click has scaled up. Tata Smart Foods, Tata Q products are in the market. And these are the ones I'm proud of. There are a couple of others, Tata Classage, which is in EdTech. Um, and while my profile says board member, actually these are businesses I have conceptualized and incubated, especially Tata Click, which I'm especially proud of, along with Tata Click Luxury. So sorry to interject, but
No, that's good.
I'm not a hands-off board member type. I'm a hands-on build the business
You're
type.
more an entrepreneur.
I'm an what's that term business folk use? Intrapreneur. So
Amazing.
I figured the Tatas should be in e-commerce, but not like Amazon, a little cut above. If you use the Tata Click app, you will see the UI UX is quite different, more brand forward. So, and fortunately, the good part is the Tatas gave me an opportunity to do what I wanted in such situations. But more to the point, I think in 87 when I graduated from ISM, I think we were one of the first batches which started going en masse to IIMs. And it was because of a bit of a shock we got. When we joined, the standard routine was to go and either join Coal India if you were in mining, or one of the other companies, we were mining machinery, and petroleum engineering, it was ONGC. And I think in my first year or my second year, ONGC suddenly said, we're not guaranteeing employment to all petroleum engineers. There was the strike,
Yeah.
the leader of the strike, all of that. Fun times. But all of us who were bright enough turned our eyes towards IIMs. And I think my batch, there were as many as 5 or 6 of us. In previous batches, there was the odd one person from ISM who went to the IIMs or something. In our batch, it was 5 or 7 or 8 of them who straight off, and another one or two went, another few went a year or two later. So, happy memories of ISM. So to all the ISMites who are listening in on this, good to have you on this, and glad that you guys are thinking of entrepreneurship. In our time, all we could think of is, are you going to get a job? Now you no longer think
That
of
was the case in
I'm going to get a
2006
job.
too.
You think, can I start a business? It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you,
Awesome.
Rakesh.
And the audience, Jamwal sir is also an active angel investors, and I think one of the recent startup he invested in also an ISM startup is M Caffeine. That's what I came to know.
Yeah, those were absolute blind investments. I mean, if somebody's going to say, what was your strategy for M Caffeine, and all those people listening in, please don't assume that I always do this. But Tarun said, I'm from your institute. How can you not invest in me? And I said, sure, it's done. And then
Sometimes that works, right?
And then Tarun put me on to Amit Sinha, and Amit said, I said, so I have a bit of a blind spot where ISMites are concerned. So I don't do too much and stuff like that. But, the idea has to make sense. The idea has to make sense. This is not an open invitation to every ISMite to come to me and I'll cut a check. I've done those two out of pure nostalgia, but they've done well. They've done well. They've done well.
And Jamwal sir, you are based out of Mumbai, correct?
I'm in Bombay. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on Saturday night. And we really appreciate your time and excited to learn from you today.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So audience, just to add one more thing, other than both of these panelists being investors, there are two more things common. Number one, both of them are engineers. And number two, both have done the MBA from prestigious, colleges. As I mentioned, Jamwal sir done from IIM Ahmedabad and Rashmi done from Kellogg School of Management. So there's a lot of similarity in background of the panelists here.
Actually, there's one more. I'm also from Mumbai, born and raised in Mumbai. So it's my
Awesome.
favorite city in the world.
And yeah, Rashmi is originally from Mumbai. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Awesome. Rashmi, I got a couple of questions. Let's start with the light, conversation first, and then we'll deep dive into fundraising. Just curious, like, did you ever plan to be VC when you kind of started your professional career?
Absolutely not. I wish I could tell you it was all charted and planned. None of it was. Like you pointed out, I was in product and engineering roles the first half of my career. I built products for Oracle in database analytics and DevOps spaces, built products for GE Healthcare in the machine learning and analytics spaces. And it was just coincidental that in my role at GE Healthcare, like KRS mentioned about entrepreneurship, what we were planning to do was launch a new product and market. And I was getting pulled into a lot of decision making around pricing and product launches and roll up acquisitions. And as an engineer, I could learn and get up to speed quickly, but I figured if I had a business degree, I could help accelerate a lot of my thinking. So I ended up doing my MBA part-time at Northwestern, where it was fortunate for GE to have sponsored my education. But when I first entered the MBA program, if you ask me what would I want to do at the end of it, I would have said continue to be in product leadership roles. I think the MBA kind of exposed me to areas on entrepreneurship and finance. And Kellogg, while is known as a marketing school, actually has a very strong finance program. And I ended up doing a couple of internships during my MBA, one with a growth equity fund and one with a private equity fund. Loved the venture experience. And that's when I decided to switch into venture full time post my MBA.
Got it. So that's how you end up into a VC world. I'm curious about one more thing actually. I know you have an 8-year-old daughter, and I'm just curious, like, did she ever ask you what do you do at work?
All the time. Actually,
And in
when
that
we
case,
were,
how do you explain like a kid like what do you do as a VC?
yeah, so in fact, she keeps asking me to come to her school for bring your parents to school day and explain what I do. And she's like, all the other parents just are able to say, like, somebody says we build cars and somebody says, like, we build these phones. And what do you do?
Yeah,
And so it was, I would say, not easy task to kind of distill it down to something that a first grader would be able to explain. And so what I told her is we help founders who come up with this amazing idea of how they can change the world, and we give them money and work alongside of them so that we can go and build this together. And then those become the big companies that your other friends' parents are at. I mean, like the Microsoft and the Apple and all of
yeah,
these other companies, they started off small. And so that's primarily what an investor does, is work through that phase. So that, I think, kind of helped her understand what exactly it is that we do. But she sat with me through numerous pitches and legal
really.
meetings. And I mean, when I don't have childcare, I bring her to work with me. So she's been through many of it. So now she's at the point where she kind of understands what product market fit means and what it takes to market a product, and how do you price a, I mean, obviously not into how to price a product, but why price is important,
Right.
and how do you look at competitive spaces. So it's definitely interesting to see it through a child's eyes.
That's awesome. Well, she's getting excellent exposure, Rashmi, and all the audience. That's what VCs do. That's the simplest, kids' language. What VCs do. Now switching to Jamwal, sir, and sir, we are from both from same college. So let's briefly chat a little bit about the campus life. And sorry, Rashmi, we might bore you for a few minutes, so please bear
No,
with us.
this is amazing. I obviously wasn't smart enough to get into IIT or IIM, so I am definitely in awe of everybody here on this call.
Thank
You're
you.
too kind. You're too kind. I think
So
my time one just I don't know. I suspect sometimes I just muddled through every competitive exam, um, and but for the fact that I was terrified of being ordinary in India, I don't think I would have done that well. But for those of you who want to know, my realization that I didn't really want a future in ONGC and petroleum engineering. Rakesh, in your time, did you have summer training every year or right after the first year?
yeah, we had two sessions, I think, right after second year and third year. Two we have to.
No, in our case, it started right after first year. So unlike other engineering colleges where you typically got on-the-job training only between your third and fourth year, we had right after the first year, and we were packed off to Ankleshwar. I don't know how many of you know about Ankleshwar. It's in Gujarat. It had some oil fields. It was just beginning to, that's where Kane Energy later on found a lot of oil. Um, and I remember seeing the ONGC housing colony there.
Yeah.
And one of my batchmates had a cousin who was, what, 7 years or 10 years older. And he said, this guy's doing really well. And he's a complete rock star. And we went to this colony in Ankleshwar. And, I don't know if you've ever seen these colonies. It's a very dystopian sort of view. You have thousands of houses, in rows, in perfectly arranged rows. And every one looks exactly like the other one. And, seeing the work on the rigs and seeing this kind of lifestyle, I said, I better find some way to work bloody hard and do something so that I don't have to go to ONGC and Ankleshwar. I was terrified. So it wasn't ambition which drove me, it was sheer terror.
Well, that Derek sometimes can inspire you to do great things, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. And just curious, like 1987, how many hostels were there in the campus those days? I mean, other than Diamond.
We had, we used to call them with a different name. I don't know if anybody there is, anybody on the call is, we used to have the White House and the Red, we used to have Red Fort and White House.
Oh, the Red Fort is diamond then.
Red Fort was all red brick, right? And it had those two badminton courts in the middle square. So we used to call that Red Fort, and the other one was called White House. And then way back at the other side used to be the Masters guys, or the MTech guys used to be in a separate hostel, which was way back beyond the chai ki dukan.
Okay.
And the messes and all that.
I see.
A lot. I believe a lot of construction has happened in the last 25, 30 years.
Oh yeah, lot has changed even since I graduated in 2006. And those days, did you guys have a canteen, sir, on campus?
We had our own messes. We had 13 different messes. So depending on where you were from, there were at least 3 Bengal messes. There were 2 Bihar messes. There was 1 Punjab mess. I was part of Punjab mess because I like North Indian food.
PMI? Was that PMI or what?
I don't know. The name must have changed, but we used to call them Bengal mess 1, Bengal mess 2. Some of them had come up with the unique names. But it was a unique thing where these messes were managed by the students themselves. I don't know if that was the case in your time as well.
And we managed, like students were managing those days, but nowadays admin manages the mess and they control everything.
We used to manage it ourselves, amongst ourselves. We used to hire the cooks, we used to pay the cooks. All that the institute gave us was a building or part of a building.
All right, let's talk about the fundraising now. So I'm going to ask a little bit questions from like entrepreneur point of view, and especially like somebody who just have an idea and then slowly progress to, or like somebody who was kind of raising Series A. So first question, maybe I can start with you, Jamwal sir, is, when it comes to, fundraising, the very first questions, a lot of people have is, or whether to raise funds or not, right? Some startups are fundable, some are not. But even, whichever we are fundable, a lot of founders, like they're trying to figure out whether they should raise funding or not. So what's your take on that? Like when, and not when, but like, whether they raise funding or not, or like how should they decide?
Good question, Rakesh. And I think a lot depends on the business that you're building. I think if you're in a business that's going to take large amounts of capital, you have to be very, very judicious as to when you raise, because unlike in the US and India, you have no concept of shares that can't be diluted, or a fixed amount of stock that can be with the founder, or at least that's not the culture. Though you do have differential voting right shares, at least the legislation is there in India. Nobody uses it. So if you're if you're going to need a lot of capital, then you have to be very judicious at what intervals and what quantities you raise. But if you're a capital light business, and the businesses that typically get funded the easiest are capital light business, and therefore the question you're asking is very relevant, because if you raise too early, you're going to dilute yourself at a much lower valuation. Having said that, founders who think the participation of angels and later VCs is only about money, I think are shortchanging themselves. You see, because while you should keep an eye on dilution and what stake you're going to have eventually, I think pick your angel investors as fellow passengers on your journey. And I'll tell you something about me personally. Yes, I do angel investing, but because I do want to get the upside along with founders. But I also do it because that's my way of, in some way, giving back the benefit of my knowledge. And I'm quite liberal with giving my time on Saturdays, weekends, late in the evening, anything. And I'm liberal that way because I can't see myself doing, social work. I can't see myself teaching kids. Everybody, I admire people who do that, Don't get me wrong. I admire people who do that, but that's not my DNA. I can't do that kind of giving back to society. But I can do what I do well, which is if they are founders or people who are starting a business, I can be a mentor or a coach.
Yeah.
And then if there's the joy of a successful journey, fantastic. So I think founders should look for that combination of money and skills. It's very important. And
Right.
also a big difference, Rakesh, and I'll stop after this because I want Rashmi also to have a chance to speak. But there's a big difference between angels, individual angels, and an angel network. And actually, people should think carefully whether they want to go for individual angels or an angel network. If you have a great network and you need a small amount of capital, pick five, six angels who can back you and be your coaches, because at one level, you're almost adding to your founding team because they'll be deeply invested in your journey. So you're getting capital and in some way you're adding to your founding team. If you need a larger chunk of capital and or if your network is not that great, then go to an angel network. But even if you go to an angel network, it's very important. First, if you can look at that angel network and even identify one or two of the members that you would prefer to have on your cap table or you want to lead the round, approach them first or target them in the pitch. And the second thing is, after you get invested in by an angel network, you typically get 30 to 40, sometimes 50 angels on your cap table. Look at each one's bio. This guy will be in software services. This guy will be with G. This guy will be. Look for both connections they can give you and look for what skill sets they can bring or which areas they can give you advice. So, anybody who looks at angels only for money is shortchanging himself.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I cannot agree more, KRS. I think what you've hit upon is a great point and something that we even mentioned to founders at the growth stage. It doesn't matter at which cycle you're raising money, whether at the early stage or at the late stage, including a pre-IPO stage, is the folks that you're bringing around the table are going to be working alongside of you for the next 5, 7 long-term years. And so make sure that they're aligned in values, vision, and objectives with what you as a founder are trying to do. In the early stages, you do want investors who are fairly hands-on and are going to be able to coach you and help guide you through that journey. But again, the one thing that I do encourage founders to think about is you don't always have to raise money to build your business. I mean, there are other ways to finance your business. If you can get customers to pay for your business and you're working alongside of them building the product, I think that's fantastic. It's non-dilutive. You get to keep a big chunk of your money. And we've seen companies do that quite efficiently. I mean, one in the enterprise space is a company called Zapier, which is in the low code, no code space. They've only raised 1.3 million of seed funding ever in the history of the company, and they're at about 125, 150 million of revenue run rate. Again, because of the way the product is very sticky, it has a very nice appeal. Customers flock to it, so they don't really need to raise money to build a business. So I'd say first of all, think about what are you trying to accomplish as a business. There are, I would say, downside or cons that you have to keep in mind when you're raising outside capital. Any investor that's coming into your business is going to invest with the objective of exiting with a great return. So if you as a founder are looking to build a lifetime business that you're never going to exit out of, do not raise capital. It's not going to be well aligned with you and your investors in terms of the objectives that they have. So if you're going down the path of fundraising, you should have a very clear objective of what your exit timeline looks like and why your investors are going to make a 10, 20x return on their capital. The other thing to also keep in mind is the governance that that brings. You no longer can run the business as any way as you choose. There are a lot of legal compliance and regulatory things that you need to be aware of, put in place. Your investors are going to ask for it. So you're signing up for a change in how you typically operate and execute anytime you open up for external funding. But if you go to the pros and what are the benefits of raising external capital, you're bringing in very seasoned folks into your cap table who know through pattern matching and what they've done in the past on what are the down traps or the downfalls that you need to be aware of so that you don't have to go through the same mistakes as what hundreds and thousands have gone through before. You will accelerate a lot faster, you will grow a lot faster. So there are pros and cons to weigh as you're thinking about the very first time you go out and raise money.
No, that's absolutely right, and I had a big realization or over the period of my learning is that, if you can bring customers as your only investors, that would be the best and ideal case. If they can fund your business every year, every month, that's what you need, and then you can bootstrap like Zapier. But yeah, having investors can also add significant value and help the company scale. Rashmi, I have a follow-up question. So let's say I, as a founder, want to raise the money, but then how do entrepreneurs decide like when is the right time? Like, I mean, other than when somebody's running out of the money, I mean, that's not the right time, but
That's
there's no.
the wrong time.
Exactly, it's the worst time to raise money.
Yeah, and that's interesting, guys. VCs or investors don't put money when you don't have money. That's very interesting situation. But like, how do they determine like when to raise money? Is there certain metrics or threshold for like a seed round or Series A and Series B that you are ready to do that? I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, so I would say pre 2019, all of the metrics looked very different. And last year, everything went out of the window with just the massive amount of frothiness that we've seen in the market. So I don't think thresholds matter anymore. I don't know how long we're going to be in this bubble, but right now there's definitely a pretty big bubble, as I'm sure many of you are seeing, both in public markets and private markets. In terms of like what are the right milestones or thresholds, it depends. When you're raising an angel round, it's really around the idea of what you're trying to build and the team, the initial founding team that you're putting together. And that's when you'd reach out to friends and family or people who've built similar companies in your space, and you look up to them and you would raise money. But that's mainly on what exactly are you trying to do. It's going to be pre-product, pre-everything. When you're raising your seed round, and again, I'm talking very general, high level terms, so does not apply to every company in every situation. But if you look at typical SaaS companies, the seed round you're typically raising when you have like a zero point 0.9 or a 1.0 version of your product. You haven't sold yet, maybe you've sold some yet, and you're piloting with maybe a couple of customers. So at least there's some product that your investors can get their hands on, or at least see what you're building. And that is typically the time when we see companies raise a seed. The Series A, again, like I said, the benchmarks vary a lot, but most of the companies typically raise an A when they're somewhere in that 1 million ARR or close to that 1 million ARR mark. And then the BC subsequently follow post that. I mean, for the B, again, for SaaS companies, it's typically in that 3 to 5 ish mark. The C is somewhere in that 5 to 10 ish mark. And then once we are in the growth stages, which is where I mainly focus on right now at B Capital, we have strong growth financial metrics that we look at. So then it becomes more of a science than an art of what
Yeah.
we look for in companies. And the bar becomes a lot higher for companies to cross the threshold than to start getting access to growth capital at that point.
So the metrics and all those financial stuff you want, they become more and more important as your business
Exactly.
matures. Really like beyond
Exactly.
Series A, it becomes very important, I guess.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, now that let's say I know my, startup is fundable, I want to raise funding, I know when to raise funding. Next question is how to reach to these investors. So, Jamwal sir, give us a little bit, tips to this entrepreneur, like how they reach out to these angels, and then maybe Rashmi, you can add from VC perspective, how to find them, how to reach out to them, how to even qualify whether they're the right partner or not. Like Jamwal sir, you already touched a little bit on that. So love to hear on that aspect from both of you guys.
Sure, Rakesh. Carrying on from where what I said earlier, it depends. If you're the highly networked type, uh, typically alumni networks itself are a great way to get in touch with angels. And if your round is small and you're a highly networked type, finding those five um, or 10 people should not be difficult if you're the networking type. In India, you don't have much of a concept of friends and family. It's almost always directly to angels, But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it'll become sensible to also do friends and family rounds. In the US, it's very, very common to do friends and family. You don't only go to professional angels. You typically do a friends and family, especially if you're confident that you have a product where people are not going to lose money. And I'll say this, my friends in the US who are in the investing side actually take a lot of comfort from friends and families rounds. And I'm hoping
Yeah.
one day that will come to India, because to me, any founder who's done a friends and family and is then coming to me, I know he's serious about this. He's committed, and he's undertaking a 10-year journey, which he's not going to just dabble in and jump out. In contrast, I do see some founders occasionally who have a pretty good business, either that their father has or that they inherited, but they want to do this thing. And sometimes I begin to end up doubting, is this guy serious? If things are bad, is he just going to dump this and go back to, why does he need to raise 50 lakhs from angels or 1 crore from angels when it's obvious that the friends and family round could easily take care of that? So these are some of the questions in my mind. But assuming you're none of those and you're not well networked, then my suggestion is the angel networks, whether it's Mumbai Angels, whether it's India Angels, which I'm part of, or Chennai Angels, almost every city has an angel network. Those are pretty accessible, and their center heads or their chapter heads are well known. Get in touch with them. But I will say one thing: there was a time when angel networks did a lot of pre-money deals, in the sense pre-revenue deals, not pre-money. Did a lot of pre-revenue deals. I think the tendency now is to be a little skeptical of doing too many pre-revenue.
So they need more proof now versus earlier, seems like.
And I'll tell you my personal view, and this is because I've actually conceptualized and launched businesses. The amount of learning that happens after you launch and when you start getting revenue, that feedback loop, it's usually huge. And when you get a founder and you're talking to him about things like valuation, etc., pre-revenue, there's a lot of stuff he doesn't know. And because it's happened to me, every single product that me and any of my teams have launched, we've always thought it's gold. And then you launch it and you realize the customer thinks it's bronze or silver. And then you have to work at it and work at it and work at it to make it a better product. People who think that you just launch it and it's gold and everybody love it, and that's it. That's the complete opposite of what's happened in every single business. The fight starts after you launch your product in the market. And when you start going out to customers and trying to get them to pay for your product, that's when the fight starts. So founders who are pre-revenue, unless they're on their second or third cycle, you see, if they're on their second or third cycle, they've been through it. But if this is the first time, they have these stars in their eyes and they think this product is a complete rock star. And then, this is that Mike Tyson saying that all game plans are fantastic until you get punched in the face. And trust me, the market and your customers punch you in the face every day.
So true.
Who's been in the business knows that. Oh.
On the growth side, actually, we see that most companies go through at least 2 or 3 pivots before they've identified what exactly is their sweet spot and what they're going to be doing. So that early stage is definitely a lot of experimentation, a lot of failures. But the quicker you can get up back on your feet and learn from the market and do something that your customers are going to care about, the higher the chances of succeeding are going to be.
Right. And Rashmi, what's your thoughts on like how to reach out to VCs and how to identify whether they're right VC for you or not?
Yeah, so I'd say at the growth stage, I'd probably categorize VCs into two buckets. One is the traditional financial investors, and then the second would be the strategic or the corporate investors. And having been in both buckets, there's different value add that you get from each at different points in time. The strategic investors you would want to bring in when there is some truly strategic partnership opportunities that you see with those investors. So when you're working with the big corporates, and Rakesh, you've worked with M12, so you know the value that Microsoft can bring to the table in terms of the sales and the go-to-market processes. And then you've got other corporate venture funds like Google has their own venture fund. SAP has Sapphire Ventures. You've got Citi, and you've got Capital One, and all of the other corporates that have their venture funds. So if there is a key strategic partnership opportunity or a go-to-market path that you see with these corporate investors, would be a good idea to tap into those. And in many cases, they will also be the ones that you're probably already working with. And so you would get connected or network to those corporate VCs through your existing customer or your business development channels. On the financial VC side, I'd say there's a couple of different ways that work out the best. Cold outreach, while everybody does it, I'd say has probably a 10% likelihood of success. The best way to get the attention of growth investors is one, warm introductions through your existing investors. And that's where being picky on who you're bringing on your cap table is important. So at the growth stage, we work with a lot of the early stage investors that we know have a great portfolio, and that becomes a source of deal flow for us. So if you're funded by one of the top or the top tier of early investors, angel investors, again, on the angel side, we track a lot of active angel investors, and we look at what companies are they funding, like Gokul at Square, and a number of other like top tier angels who either founded companies before, have been entrepreneurs before, or are operators at large companies. That also is a great way. So warm introductions from your early investors, angel investors, is a great path. And the second, which takes more time but is actually the most effective way, is to really build a successful company and build the brand with it. You want investors chasing you, not you chasing investors. And that helps give you the leverage of commanding a high valuation, making sure that, again, you have the ability to pick and choose who you want to work with. It, again, is the harder path to build to success, but it is one that always yields the best result in terms of the outcome that it creates. So those two, I would say, are the key ways of at least getting the attention of growth investors.
Got it. Rashmi, you mentioned about like you also then do you collaborate with these all seed VCs and angels as well, or just more like you just track them and observe what they're investing in?
No, we have regular connections meetings. Like I have at least 40 seed and early stage VCs that I work with quite closely, and we catch up on a regular basis. I am up to speed on the investments that they're making. We start tracking these companies early on. So even though we only typically invest in the Series C or D stages, we're tracking these companies from the seed and the Series A stages. So that's how we're building relationships and getting to know the teams. And we get to track their progress over time, which is why I said it's important who you bring to your cap table to get on the attention and the tracking list of the growth investors. And the better you execute on your company's progress, the more excited you're going to get the growth investors who are going to end up chasing you. There's a lot of, I hate to say it, but there is a lot of fear of missing out mentality amongst investors, and there's a lot of hype investing that happens. And so the more, I would say, hype and brand you can create about your company, and that should be based on product success. It can't just be vaporware, because people can see through that very, very clearly. But the more success that you're building through customer traction and actual product IP, you're going to get the attention and the mind share of the investors. I mean, everybody pays extremely close attention. You probably don't see that on the outset, but investors are paying very close attention to the companies that we track. Like we have about 50 to 100 companies on our active tracking list at any given point in time, where we're ready to preempt rounds and lead the rounds. And we work quite closely with those founders.
Awesome. Well, we use word tracking quite a few times. I'm just curious, and again, you don't need to answer if you don't want to. Do you guys use any sort of like internal tracking tool to kind of scan the internet and find like, hey, what startups are hot in the market, and then you figure out how to reach them?
So there's multiple tracking tools that are being used. In fact, there are some funds that also have their own data science teams that actually run a number of algorithms to track who's moving from which company, who's hiring from which company, how are the teams coming together, what is the customer feedback on Gartner and G2 and some of the other research reports. So there's a lot of data that goes into it. I would say the level of data science and ML varies across different funds. I know there are at least two funds that have over 200 data scientists on their team. All
Wow.
they do is just run algorithms to track which companies we should be looking at. We're not at that scale yet, but we do have a good way to get all of these data points, and a lot of that just comes from speaking with the buyers. Like we have a pretty extensive CXO network where we're speaking with CIOs and CTOs and CISOs all the time, learning about what pain points do they have, what products are they using, which startups are they excited about, how does it compare with other products, and that becomes an important data point that helps us track which companies we should be getting close to.
Seems like you VCs work very hard too, like entrepreneurs.
We do. I know it doesn't appear that way, but we do.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's moving on to next. Let's say now I want to raise money and I've identified the right investor. So maybe I can ask you, Jamwal sir, like what are you looking for in a startup? Like what are those things which excites you? Like, hey, this is the startup I want to invest in, you know? And what are the things those entrepreneurs need to highlight to you so that you can make the decisions pretty quickly? And then Rashmi, I'll love to hear from VC point of view, like what are you guys looking for in a startup when you invest? So
Yeah.
over to you, Jamwal sir.
By the way, one of the things that I should mention, and Rashmi has given a good perspective of the US ecosystem, that's pretty true of India also. The VCs are the ones who are in a way far more organized than the angels, and they go backwards reaching out to angels. So I've had not only VCs and micro VCs tell me that, look, if any of your angel investments is looking appropriate for us, please give us a heads up. I've even had venture debt folks give me the same heads up or ask for introductions to people in my portfolio. So, while an angel investor is an individual and will do what he can to make a startup a success, the VCs are very active in looking backwards to the funnel and seeing what they can make of the funnel and who are the people who will contribute to the funnel. And in India also, it's becoming more organized. So when you pick your angels, as Rashmi said, if you pick your angels who have good forward-looking networks or forward funnels, that's also a big plus, because automatically once you reach a certain stage, once you're outside their bracket of funding, they will have the connections to VCs to put you in touch with them. In terms of what I look for in a startup, for me, uh, team and the founding team is a very, very large part. And to the extent possible, I try and spend a fair amount of time with the founders or the founding team. Let me tell you one rule that I've learned over the years. Great idea, average founding team. My loss ratio is higher than average idea, great founding team. That say it all to you. Uh, so in terms of what comes first, for me personally, it's always the founder or the founding team. what's their personality, and everything about their personality. Do they have a strong vision? Do they have a strong differentiation? Are they going to be able to execute? Do they have the right mix of skills? And there's a lot that's been written about this, but in reality, I found startups, while they can read everything that's been written about, what's an ideal founding team and domain experience, execution, etc. Uh, the fact is, I found most startups coalesce around an idea, um, and it perhaps could be more organized, but at the end of it, you're a founder. You come up with an idea. You talk to a couple of people who you think could work with you, or the idea comes by you guys talking together. So there's an art aspect, or a sort of biology aspect almost to how these startups get started. And all I do as an angel is I look very closely at the founding team. Yes, because I have multi-sector experience, I evaluate the idea very carefully. But like I told you, my heuristic is fairly straightforward. Um, I have very little FOMO, and that's the funny part about me. I more than enough deals coming to me, so I have very little FOMO. I'm perfectly happy to let a deal go. And the funny part is, I'm finding nowadays a lot of founders are very diligent. Like this guy got a lot of VC interest, and as India Angels, we were taking time because I said, look, you're not even in the market yet. Go to the market, spend a month, come back to us. Despite getting VC interest, he comes back to India Angels and said, I've set aside half the round for India Angels because I like the way you guys coached me, especially you. And I want you guys on my cap table, even though the VCs are offering to take the whole round. So you're finding an interesting breed of founders who are also equally, just like I'm looking for people who fit my sort of construct. They're looking for angels who fit their construct. It's not just about money anymore. It's interesting times, very interesting times.
Yeah.
Rashmi, from VC perspective.
Yeah, completely agree, Karis, with your perspective. In fact, there was one deal that we've been tracking for almost 6 months now. We're finally getting an opportunity to consider investing in the company, and spent almost 45 minutes with the founder where I was being interviewed by him on our investing philosophies and what would I bring to the table and how would I react to some hypothetical situations on the board. So it's, for me, it's always a great sign when the founder is that diligent and takes that time to get to know the investors. I know they're going to be as thorough and diligent in their business as well. So I always view that as a great sign. Then some founders just get carried away with valuation and big brand names and are not paying enough attention to who the partner at that fund is going to be working with you for the next 5 to 7 years, because it really makes, it can change the trajectory of a business if you bring on the right people around the board. In terms of what we look for in companies at the growth stage, I'd say it's very clear. It's four simple things. We look for team, we look for product, we look for market, and we look for execution. And again, if you dive down, there are deeper metrics across each one of them. So the growth stage, everything is metrics driven. So it becomes less of potential value to come, but it's just more measurable at the time we come in, and that's primarily because at the time where we come in, most of the product risk and the market risk have been de-risked. And what we're looking for is really growth risk at that point. And so the loss ratios that we can take is a lot lower than what early stage investors can take. And so we really have to be sure about the investments that we make. On the team side, I think I can't emphasize, and Kiara's touched upon as well, is by far the most important thing that we look for. Regardless of what stage you're in, a company can live or die by the team that you have. So definitely really, really critical to have the best team. And in many cases, we have seen companies go through an evolution where they're up leveling their teams when they get to the growth stage. Because in many cases, the team that you have that helps you get from 1 to 10 or 1 to 25 is not going to be the same team that takes you from 25 to 100. And so how do you build the team that has the experience and has the ability to help you grow into that 100 million plus ARR run rate? On the market, definitely we want to tackle companies that are going after big, massive problems. Because at the growth stage, we're not looking for the 200 to 300 million exit, we're looking for a billion plus exit at that point. And so are these large markets that can help sustain companies to grow to that level? And so if it's a small niche space, then probably not the best fit for growth capital. But if you're going after big problems, yes. On the product, the differentiation, it's really how do you differentiate against your competitors? What's your moat? What's your IP that you have? Why will you succeed compared to other large companies or other startups that are in that space? And then the fourth one, which definitely is a very important factor, is around metrics and execution. So for SaaS companies, we're looking for standard SaaS metrics all the way from net retention to LTV to CAC and the magic number and the hype ratios, and then year over year growth. Because one thing that you want to make sure, specifically as you're going into the growth phase, and I'd say that these days many companies are realizing that growth at all costs is not going to be viewed very positively by companies. So if you're burning 100 million to get to 20 million, you're not going to get a lot of investor interest in that. So you have to pay attention to how are you optimizing for efficiency with that top level growth.
Awesome. No, that was very insightful, Rashmi. You touched on a little bit on the valuation. You brought up this question, and I think every entrepreneur have this one question is how do I decide the valuation and what sort of equity I give away to the investors, whether it's the angel level or even at the VC level. So maybe Rashmi, just add a little bit more to that, and then love to hear Jamwal sir, your thoughts on that.
Actually, it's more difficult at the early stage level. So I have invested in seed and Series A stages as well, both at Intel and Microsoft. And at B Capital now we have an early stage fund, which I'm very happy to be on the growth stage, because valuation at the growth stage is a lot easier to triangulate. It's based on market comps, it's based on the growth rates that the company has, and it's based on exit potential. So for us, it's really more around financial modeling to arrive at the valuation, but then some of it gets tempered with how competitive the deal is and how much we might have to move up or down on the valuation to make the deal work. But on the early stage side, it definitely is more of an art rather than science, where you don't have the traction, you don't have the numbers, and the bet really is on the founding team and what they are going to build. So I think KRS, you should chime in with how you come up with valuation at that angel and the seed rounds.
You're absolutely right. It's not easy, but there are three things we factor in. And funnily enough, and this is for all the prospective entrepreneurs there, we actually look at your dilution very carefully. So, the first is how much are you raising and do you need to raise? That's the first input. At least that's typically fixed by the entrepreneur. And what I want to stress is we actually as angels tend to look at after this round, where are you? If you're already below 50% after this round, it's a mess.
To stay motivated.
Yeah, that means you're not going to last beyond the next one or two rounds, because you'll be diluted like to levels where you're not going to be very motivated. So we actually look at dilution very closely. And we have loads of thumb rules, but those thumb rules, at least I have loads of thumb rules. 100x VC asked me to come and talk to those guys, and they kept asking me the same question. We are a direct to consumer company. How would you value us? And I said, look, it's different if your gross margin is 80% versus if your gross margin is 60%. It's different if you're in a sector which is going to grow at 70% versus if you're in a sector that's going to grow at 30%. So why? And I gave them some thumb rules, and it's longer than what this session should take, because actually, Rakesh, I'm quite keen that We have a rapid fire round where we answer some of the Q&A and make people come in on the Q&A piece. But yes, there's an art to it, but you develop certain thumb rules which help you. At least when you're getting a pitch, you can tell the founder that, are you fixated on this valuation? If you are, let's move on. And because you know in your mind that if this guy is fixated on this valuation, I'm not interested. But if he says I'm flexible and you can give him a counter offer, then you're open to it. But yes, there's a lot of, the reason why it can be an art and it can still survive is, remember, you're looking at a 10x, 20x in at least some part of your portfolio. When you're looking at a 10x or 20x in the winners in your portfolio, um, getting the valuation wrong by 10% doesn't really matter that much.
Right.
The success matters more than getting that exact valuation. And I never believed in excessive nickel and diming. Like, there was this founder of a very interesting startup. He's in revenue, doing fairly well. And he came to us and he said, when I first approached you, it's taken 3 months. The process in the network took 3 months. He says, I'm getting offers which are higher, but I'm going to stick with that valuation. I said, I'm proud of you. He says, but the problem is I have this celebrity who I'm going to have to fund through shares, but that's going to come at a valuation. I said, okay, let's cut a deal. If you get that celebrity and you hit your metrics, I'll give you the higher number. If you miss and you don't hit your metrics, we'll do a clawback to the number that we originally discussed. So there's no point nickel and diming. You look at outcomes and try and factor in and adjust to the outcomes. That's the best. That find win-win situation. And I've found the good part of being co-investors, so to speak, between founders and angels, is that you can always find a way to align incentives. And if you align incentives, you're good.
Great. I have two more questions and we are a little over time. So Rashmi and sir, are you okay for additional 10 minutes?
I'm okay. I'm especially keen that we handle some of the Q&A that's there. Because if folks have been listening in and writing out some of the stuff,
I'll ask two really short, maybe questions may be long, but like if you guys can keep answers short, and then we will switch to Q&A. The first one is process. Like what's the typical process of this whole closing the deal from investors' point of view, angels, and then VC? A lot of people don't understand, like even like things you guys do behind the scene within your group. I mean, VCs particularly. So if you guys can enlighten a little bit on the process front, and then I have one more question.
If you want, I'll go first and I'll be very quick. With an individual angel, if you're doing a round and if you're really smart and let's say you have somebody who helps you with a term sheet and all, you can get it really done fast, because all you have to have is a standard term sheet which is even-handed, and after that the detailed shareholders agreement, share subscription agreement. These are all pretty standard forms. So as long as you don't try and sort of fiddle around with standard terms, you're okay. iSafes are an even easier version. I want to take a minute to just tell people that in a network, they should be aware that it takes a little longer. In a network, you first pitch to the network. If you get shortlisted, you actually then have to take the lead group through what your business plan and everything is. Once the lead group agrees that it's worth a deal worth doing, they then post the deal on the network. And if the deal gets subscribed, so before they post the deal in the network, you just have a term sheet. You don't have final documentation. After the deal gets subscribed by the network, you have both a due diligence and final documentation. And typically that process takes 3 months. So if you're raising money at the angel stage and you're going to a network, be aware that it'll take 3 to 4 months and budget for that time. Frankly, even individual angels, by the time you do documentation, it's not less than 2 months.
Great. And Rashmi, from VC perspective, what's the process looks like?
So our process can take anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks from start to close. We typically staff a deal team once we get excited about the company, and we go through a diligence process where we're working with a company to sift through the financials and spending time with the sales and the go-to-market team. We're speaking with a lot of customers. Most of the customers we speak to are through our own network, and then we get some customer referrals from the company. And then the deal team typically goes through an IC process with our investment committee. The goal is to get approval through the investment committee, and every fund has a different process in how they structure their IC process. But it's fairly intense work when we're actively working on a deal, because again, there's a lot of, at the growth stage, there's a lot of diligence that the team goes through, and then comes back on the other side with a term sheet. Post term sheet, it's really working on docs and the financials, just verifying everything is fine from a legal perspective. To start to finish, like I said, the fastest we have done is in 2 weeks, but the typical deal time takes somewhere between 4 to 5 weeks.
Wow.
And how long is the diligence process post term sheet to getting money in the bank account?
Post term sheet is fairly quick. It typically takes about a week or two. I mean, again, if you have docs in order and everything is fine, it's clean. Like KRS said, we always like clean docs. So if you don't have anything non-standard in it, should be a week or less. But if we're going back and forth and trying to clean up docs, and you need to get approval from all of your other investors, I mean, that can take a week or two.
Awesome. All right, let's switch to the Q&A. Sorry, Jamwal, you wanted to add?
There's one piece of advice I want to give anybody who's doing a startup. And that is, in India especially, keep an eye on your financial and legal compliances. There was this really fantastic startup, and when we did the legal due diligence, we found the guys now had not been filing ESIC, which is the for employees, the state insurance, the insurance of employees and stuff like that. And those red flags cannot be corrected. So the deal just had to fall through. So use an outsourced provider. There are lots of people who provide CFO services, who provide legal compliance services. If you're a small startup, find an outsourced provider, but make sure your compliances and your financials are in order. Things move much faster if that's the case.
Fair enough. Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot. I'm gonna switch to someone on Q&A. Let's do more like a rapid fire sort of quick one. I'm just speaking here. Maybe whoever want to go first, it's up to you guys. How would you perceive if there's a single founder in a startup? Does investor, VC, or NGL hesitate to invest in such a startup?
Yes.
Okay, that was good.
For us, it doesn't matter. Like I said, at the growth stage, we have other metrics to look at. So I have funded companies with a single founder.
Well, it seems like before you get there, they need angels and angels saying no. So I would say,
no, I'm not saying no, but does it make me pause? Yes, it makes me pause. And then you know what I do? At least he'll have some team members. I'll watch the dynamic of that single founder with his or her team members very carefully.
Right. All right. A question directly for you, Jamwal, sir, from Anonymous. Would you like to mentor a bootstrap startup without investing in it?
I've done that typically for social sector startups. Nowadays, my time is less I have less free time, but I've done that for social sector startups. And I've done it for social sector startups who were in impact, but were a for-profit startup. Because I said, I think you're doing a good thing, but I just can't see myself investing to make money in something that is such a focused impact area. But, my depth of involvement and my sort of, the brain always gets triggered much more when you have money to lose. So let's face it, that's why the whole angel to VC to PE ecosystem works, because you have aligned incentives.
Yeah, skin in the game definitely changed the dynamics.
Yeah, exactly.
A question for you, Rashmi. A lot of Indian startups want to raise money from Valley, right? Anyway, like mainly Valley. How should they do that? I mean, it's a little longer, but if you can really summarize, like, how should they approach this? Because after they hit like A or B round, they definitely want to go big and raise some significant money and bigger partner.
Yeah, and we have funded companies. So I have a company in my portfolio called Innovaser, which started off in Gurgaon and then moved to the Valley. to, I would say, primarily get investment from the US investors, you need to show commitment that you're willing to move your base to the US and build a significant, sorry,
That's fine.
and build a significant go-to-market presence in the US. And if we take innovation, and Rakesh, you've done that with LoginRadius as well. If you are based in India, trying to sell to US customers is definitely a long haul. And so, what we typically look for is the ability for companies to be able to build a sales and go-to-market team in the US. You can still leverage your product and R&D teams in India. I think there's significant cost advantages to doing that. But to be able to sell to a US or a global market, you need to have presence in that market. And so, are the teams committed to make that happen? And are you well positioned to compete against the top competitors in US markets? Like given with LoginRadius, like you're competing against the cream of the crop. You can't just say that, well, I'm just going to sit in my niche and the big competitors keep winning mind share. The same with Innovator, they're competing with some of the largest healthcare IT vendors in the world. And are you able to compete and win against those and hence show the growth and traction? So is it possible? Yes. Does it take time and commitment? Yes.
Awesome. Question quickly, maybe Jamwal sir, you can add on this one. When to decide to stop working on my startup? Like when should I call it's done, it's failed, move on? How do entrepreneurs decide that? I
Well,
know it's very hard for entrepreneurs to move on.
that's a tough one, because mostly you get so invested. And in companies where I've been on the board and the lead director on the board, I know that I've stretched the patience of my business house and the funders by dragging it on at least a year or two, and a startup doesn't have that luxury. So my suggestion is the moment you realize that the market is not giving you traction, a dropout, and if you can, return money to investors. But even after you've realized it's not going to work at all, the tendency to drag it on to till the last penny is gone is something that if you have the option of cutting off earlier, or at least saying, look, I've still got half the money, I'm going to just stop. I'm not going to burn anymore, but I'm going to figure out a pivot for 3 months without burning. Actually, angels will support that. There's one startup that I'm actually doing that with.
Got it.
But
Awesome. All right.
COVID came in between and COVID destroyed that business model. But the founder is such a great guy.
Yeah.
He's taken a pause. He's earning small amounts and he's pivoting. And I think his pivot will succeed.
Excellent. All right. Thanks a lot, audience, for asking all the questions. I have two last questions, and we're going to conclude. First, I'm going to ask Rashmi. Rashmi, we have quite a few women entrepreneurs in our community, and you are such an inspiring woman, leader, both on the operator side and now on the VC front. Love to hear your message and maybe some advice to our women entrepreneur in the community from you.
Yeah, so first of all, we're incredibly excited to support female founders and female entrepreneurs. I think we definitely need a lot more of those, not just in India, but in the US and international markets as well. The advice that I would give is, one, do not try to, I would say, hesitate and just wait for too long to build the team you need, to get the funding you need. I think in many cases, I think female founders and even female investors, we hold ourselves to a lot higher standards than our male counterparts. And again, what I've realized over the course of many years is there is no need to do that. So continue to build amazing companies. There's a lot of awareness on wanting to fund more female founders. And so reach out to the investors that you know are going to be supportive. Seek out female investors. You'll always find that there is just a better camaraderie that you can build with them. But I think the market's ready. Everybody is hungry and wants to fund amazing founders, especially diverse founders. So we're excited to see how that evolves. And so reach out to people who can help. Reach out to female VCs. I mean, even if you're not at the growth stage, I'm happy to connect folks with the early stage investors in my network. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and let's build amazing companies here.
Awesome. Thank you, Rashmi. And last question to you, Jamwal sir. You know, there are a lot of, juniors are listening today and more going to watch you on video. Then you look back, maybe, 87, like when you were like a 20 some year old, and those, most of the kids, like people are here now, like what advice would you give to yourself even, or, to all the students and, recent grads?
I would say that whatever you're doing, be very focused and go very deep. I did, it worked for me. And I was fortunate that I grew up at a time when the distractions were far smaller. Today, with the attention economy, everybody is competing for your attention. Social media, WhatsApp, a whole lot of things. But if you ask me, the folks who will excel, and I'm not talking only about studies, are the people who learn to go deep and focus. Don't, when you're doing something, focus entirely, be in that moment. That's what life is about. And that's
Awesome.
change the world. If you focus, you can change the world. If your focus is dissipated on 20 things, you're not going to change anything.
Thank you so much, Rashmi and Jamwal sir. Really appreciate joining the session and even spending an additional even 15 minutes on top of our scheduled time. I absolutely had fun and learned so much today, and I hope our audience enjoyed it too. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate on behalf of the community and all the entrepreneurs.
Thank you
Yeah,
for doing this, Rakesh. Thank you.
yeah.
It
Thank you
was really
for hosting this, and it was amazing to get to know you, KRS.
same here, Rashmi. And Rakesh, thank you for doing this. It's, just as a snippet, I'll tell you this. After I graduated, I've never been back to ISM.
Oh no, we should schedule some session with.
And believe it or not, I was not only gold medalist, I was also best all rounder. I never even went back for the convocation. Maybe that's my sort of attitude of always moving forward and being in the moment. I never even went back for the convocation to get either the best student shield or my gold medal. I think they sent me the certificates or something. But I have very happy and very very fun memories of that campus. It was always the jewel in Dhanbad, and I had a blast. So memories, and for all the students who are there, enjoy these 4 years and have fun.
Awesome. All right, then. Great. With that, let's conclude the session. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And thank you so much, Rashmi and Jamwal, sir. Rashmi, you have a rest of the great weekend. And Jamwal, sir, you have a good night.
Thank you, Rakesh.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rakesh.
Bye-bye.